Who is next?
Yeah. So
how about we do this? How about we take both questions at the same time so we can get both questions in, and then I'll answer both, and then we'll go to lunch. Yeah, we'll just group the questions. So you'll ask, and then you'll ask, and then I'll try to answer both simultaneously.
Yeah, so one of the things I liked about your presentation a lot is that you explained some of the benefits of having a father and some of the consequences of not having a father. But to make your argument complete, I mean, you could say fatherhood is so good, so why not have two of them? Right. So you have to explain why, it's so important to have a mother as well. So I was wondering if you could maybe explain more the benefits for a child of having a mother around and what maybe some of the consequences would be of not having one. Thanks.
I guess mine is a little bit different and probably more like the practical consequences of if we go the road where we do afford everybody their right, for example, the gentleman before me, the right to get married. You talk a lot about social impact and the social consequences. I think we're dealing a lot with how much this is going to cost in the future. So I'm wondering if we could just take that type of a view of like, well, let's suppose quantitatively we have a number of people who want to redefine marriage, and so it becomes the case that it will be redefined. How would we adjust? How do we adjust and prepare and solve the problems that maybe people can't agree what the cause of the problem is, but it needs to be solved. So children who need parenting.
Yeah, both questions, great. We don't know as much from kind of a robust social science perspective about mothering, partly because we don't have very many instances of children growing up without mothers. So what I mentioned earlier is that whenever a child is born, a mother is close by, and that most of the instances of single parenting are actually single mothering. So we know much more about what it's like to grow up without a father, because unfortunately there are a huge portion of the American population in that situation. And so the scientists have been able to study that particular situation with greater delicacy than mothering. But we know that on average mothers tend to be the more nurturing, the more compassionate, the more supportive. We can know biological things. Only mothers are the ones who can nurse a child. So far men can't. But there was an earlier question about nanotechnology and what we're going to do. And so who knows? But I mean, so far there are biological differences in which the mother, one, will be more likely to be nursing the child, but also she tends to be the more nurturing of the two. So if you are looking at this, what would happen if you grew up without a mother, maybe you would have all of the problems of typical male misbehavior just compounded on each other. You'd be more of an insensitive jerk because you didn't have your mother softening you. That's what happened to me. I don't have any sisters. I only have brothers. And I think it's the same. Actually, I think siblings have a huge impact on us as we grow up. For the other question, I'll answer this in two ways. One is that I think to a certain extent, whatever happens in law and policy, we as free citizens will always be capable of living out the truth about marriage in our own lives. And so I think to a certain extent, the best defense of marriage are healthy, happy marriages. And the best way of protecting the rights of children is by being a good parent, a good mother, or a good father to your own children, and helping your own children grow up to be good spouses to their husband or wife and good parents to their children. And so in this sense, no matter how the law defines marriages, our individual communities, whether it's a religious community, educational community, a civic society, whatever sort, can be encouraging men and women to commit to each other permanently and exclusively and to raise their kids. So marriage prep programs at churches, pre-Cana programs, marriage saver programs, there is a host of opportunities for us to get involved to try to recreate a marriage culture. And on a college campus, I actually think it's something like the Anscombe Society that's taking a lead in doing that here at Stanford. Doing that in terms of educating students about the importance of marriage, educating students in terms of Dr. Budiszewski's talk about the importance of the virtue of chastity, about preparing yourselves now as an 18 or a 19-year-old so that when you're 25 and you're getting married, you can be a faithful spouse, you can be a good husband, a good wife, be a good mother, a good father, that those habits are either developing now into virtues or developing now into vices. So I think the work that Judy and Irene and other students are doing here at Stanford is one way in which we can do that. The last thing I'll say is if we get a string of bad court rulings if the law and the politics go against us. I think here we just take a lesson from the pro-life movement. In 1973, February of 1973, a month after the Roe v. Wade decision, it would have been easy for students at a place like Stanford to say, well, we've lost, let's just give up. But they didn't. And so Professor Bryson was one of the pro-life leaders here, probably, 20 years after that, leading the pro-life movement here. But there have been pro-life leaders for the past 40 years who have refused to accept Roe v. Wade as the truth about the Constitution when it comes to unborn children, or the truth about unborn children. And so for 40 years, we've had philosophers and embryologists and biologists and lawyers making intellectual arguments, vindicating the rights of the unborn. We've had statesmen like Henry Hyde and Ronald Reagan and Ed Meese crafting the public policy and the legal policies. We've had advocacy groups like Silent No More and Susan B. Anthony List and Americans United for Life and National Right to Life. And we've had crisis pregnancy centers all across the nation doing everything they can in different ways and forms, artistically, culturally, intellectually, legally, bearing witness to the truth of life. And at 1973, public opinion was rapidly shifting against pro-lifers. At one point, it was 67% pro-choice, 33% pro-life. You had all of the elites saying that pro-lifers were on the wrong side of history, and you had politicians who were pro-life initially, people like Ted Kennedy and Bill Clinton and Al Gore and Jesse Jackson, evolved to become pro-choice. But over the past 40 years, all of that work that has been done with the pro-life movement, your generation's now more pro-life than your parents' generation. And a majority of Americans now support the right to life for the unborn. And so the same thing that happened 40 years ago with the right to life movement would need to happen politically on the marriage issue. And so it's that twin factor of cultural efforts and political efforts. That's what we have to do on the marriage issue. Thank you.